Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to What is Fabrizio Inking? I am Fabrizio, and today I'm going to be inking this. It's a Hawkman pinup. Not something I do very often, but figured I'd try it out. Started a few weeks ago, but before I get to that, check out my comic, Horace H. Hoover, Cult Mystery Adventure, currently available from alternacomics.com. Issues 1 and 2 are available now. Issue 3 will be in a campaign in January, 4 and 5 later that year. Bit of a throwback to this sort of old school colors, but also some stuff you probably never saw before. So check it out. All right, let's see who's in chat. Midnight Mausoleum. Hey, how's it going, Marlena? Dr. Mask. Oh, speaking of which, you know what? I got, Marlena, I got your the first season right before it was discontinued, thankfully. I'm like, oh no. That was supposed to be my Christmas watching, but I got pretty ill. So that's coming up over the next week. I'll check that out. I'm glad I got it before it got discontinued. Dr. Mask, how's it going? Working on a card game design and listening. Oh, that's fun. I do have a soft spot for that kind of stuff. I've never finished one, but I do have an idea for a card game that I've been kind of noodling with for a while. "15 years. Man, that's impressive. That's awesome, though. That's so cool to have that catalog of episodes, and very, very cool. Yeah, I'm excited to check it out. I am feeling pretty good, yeah. If I spontaneously start coughing into the mic, I apologize, but I think I'm pretty good. I streamed like once last week, and I'm like, yeah, that was a little too early. By the end of it, I had regressed. But anyway. Yeah, I kind of left. Well, you know what? I'll zoom in a bit. I kind of left the not so fun parts. So this, I might jump around a lot to finish this out, just because it's a lot of repetition. I think it, I mean, Marlena, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't it just like you don't have any more available, I think? Any more DVDs, I should say. I always talk about how A Christmas Carol is my favorite Christmas story. I mean, because it's a ghost story, so you get like the best of both worlds. You get the Christmas season, and you get ghosts and creepy imagery. So, Christmas Carol. Did I say story? Darn it, I might have said story. Christmas Carol is always on the docket for Christmas movies. I do have a video. I posted it on Twitter, but I will share in a bit. I finished sculpting Max for my comic, and I'm really happy with it. So that'll definitely be a download, an STL download, or a resin model later on in 2024. That way, at minimum, I'll have Horace H. Hoover, I'll have Max, and then maybe in between issues 4 and 5, I'll probably sculpt Slurp. So I'll have all three of those. The one thing that I really am happy with is the pose. You'll notice that Horace H. Hoover, like, everything is really, a lot of the character is in the pose. Sort of like he's kind of leaning back, his hands are on his hips, his head might be tilted a little bit, a little back. So whenever I did Max, I really wanted as much of the character to come through in the pose. I didn't want sort of a stock pose, so I feel like I really succeeded in that way. Marlena, the old DVDs we ordered are last batches of everything from 2009 to 2013, and we're just letting them run out. Sold tons over the years, but we have so much newer stuff available. That's cool. It's so tempting for a completionist collector to grab that old stuff like myself. I'm like, oh man, I gotta start from the beginning. And I'm so picky. I can't stand anything we did prior to 2017. Don't like the lighting sound. I get that. It's still very cool to see, how far you've come. It's like anything. Like when I'm looking at old drawings, it's the same deal. It's like, oh man, I hope nobody ever sees that drawing. But you gotta be. I try to give myself a pass as much as possible. But I get it. I'm reticent to announce anything that I haven't shown on stream, but I started a Horace H. Hoover tarot card deck. So it's going to take a while, but I'm going to release a few at a time. And basically, I'm making them so they're essentially poster size. So they're not just cards. There'll be prints that you can hang on your wall. And then, as the deck gets built, basically, you'll be able to collect the actual tarot cards. But until then, they'll just be really nice prints that you can hang on your wall. So I'm pretty excited about that. But I gotta get pages done. So it all comes down to the pages. That sounds awesome. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. Again, I'm always reticent to announce things until I've shown it but it's gonna be a while in the making. So I'll probably show some in progress stuff and maybe even do some of the inking on these ink streams. I figured if there's any comic book character and characters that would be perfect for a tarot deck, I felt like it was Horace H. Hoover. We have new posters coming next week. We used to announce ahead of time, but now we just wait until everything is in hand. Yeah, I know. It's always so tricky. Like my Horace H. Hoover resin model, I finished it last year. I sent it to a model maker, but it's just taken quite a bit longer than I had expected. So then I kind of regret announcing it ahead of time. So gets so excited about it, you know, it's understandable for sure. So there's a lot of black in this area. So I gotta make sure that they don't run into each other and become one giant black hole, so to speak. I definitely have to leave white, a lot more white than I normally would in this area. So instead of a very dark shadow, it's gonna have some white in it. I collect tarot decks. I have around 20. Who knew there were so many? I have just the original, but I love looking at them. But I never get around to buying them, which is, it's a shame because there's so many beautiful ones I've seen that I really would love to own. Dr. Mass, tarot cards are cool, different feel to them. They would be cool also making prints and getting the most out of your art. Yeah, I wanted to make sure that, you know, anytime I do a fairly large project, I kind of want to get as much of it out of it as I can. And, you know, some people won't get the whole decks, so I wanted to make sure the art was high res enough to make a poster. And plus, there's some cool, so for some of the tarot deck, you know, you have the Magician, you have Death, you have all of these things, and it's always fun to see who gets what slot. Who gets the Magician, or as opposed to who gets, and I'm blanking on some of the other ones, but like figuring out a clever way to portray the cards is pretty fun. I don't think Pete's announced it, but I'm going to be on his channel on the 19th of January, so that should be fun. I was thinking about it. I really, you know, the last time it was just me and him on an interview was, well, my first interview for Alterna, which is 2 years ago at this point. So a lot of stuff has happened since then, so that should be pretty fun. I've met a lot of people, which is pretty cool. Yeesh. I do have a couple more fan art pieces in mind. Again, I don't... This might be the first one I've ever done and finished and inked since I was very, very young. But ever since I did this one, I'm like, oh, you know what? It would be cool. There's a few more in mind, I think, that would be cool with my style of inking and using a brush. So I do have a few ideas. I always wanted to do Doctor Strange, something like that. This ink is quite a bit lighter than previous ink. One second. Yeah, if you get inks that are too different, it can really mess up a drawing. It's definitely one of those things that if you don't finish a drawing in a day, becomes a bigger issue. So hopefully just mixing that up helped out. Dr. Mask, Pete does a great job on those interviews, but he has had lots of practice. He makes sure to steer the ship and keep people on track. Yeah, for sure. I am not great at that. I've only had a few people on, but yeah, like getting the conversation to keep going and not like die, or like you said, steer the ship. 'Cause there's a tendency to just kind of fall back on certain topics and kind of venting about comics and the comic book industry. That happens a lot, so looking forward to that. So I just finished A Christmas Carol, and I'm like, I gotta pick a new book to read. And I've been wanting to read this book for quite some time. I don't know if anybody knows House of Leaves. It's a kind of cult famous book. It's pretty interesting about, like, the layout becomes part of the story, from what I understand. Like the actual layout of the book and the words and the pages. So I'm really interested to see how that works out. I know a few people that have read the book and that recommended it to me. So I'm like, well, I definitely trust their opinion. And if there are ways to, I don't know, incorporate some of that stuff into comic books, I am all for like moving things forward. I don't want to say forward, but in an experimental direction, I should say, sometimes. funny because this, oh, Dr. Mask, there's a video on YouTube how to read House of Leaves. I might need that video. Yeah, it looks very interesting. Basically, I think at its core, a ghost story, which is obviously up my alley. Yeah, I think it's one of those books that people pore over and like really, I don't want to say they read stuff into the book. Maybe that stuff is in there, maybe it's not, but it's one of those books that lend itself to that sort of study. So I'm pretty excited about that. I don't think that's going to work. At this point, it's one of those deals where you just don't want to mess up the drawing at this point. It's probably pretty hard since I got like the sort of the core area that your eye is going to really go to done. So as long as I don't really mess up the bottom half, should be fine. It's always a possibility though, that's for sure. Dr. Mask, I wish I could read faster or could spend more time on reading. I like if I get 2 or 3 short books read per year. Trust me, I definitely sympathize with that. I think back to the years where I don't know what I was doing, but I didn't have any responsibility and I just read. I just read all the time. So I think back on those days where, yeah, I would spend hours and hours a day just reading, ripping through books, but it definitely doesn't happen anymore. I have to set aside time, and even then it's not a lot of time. So I'm really picky about the books I read now, whereas before I used to be like, I'll try this, I'll try that book, I'll try this author. I'm like, no, I definitely need some information on the book and the author to take that. It's time basically to read. Spicer McLeroy, hey, how's it going? What up, brother? How was your New Year's Eve? What's going on? All the best to you, and Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Yeah, it was good. I was, as I was saying, I was sick, but feeling better, so it wasn't quite as festive as other ones, but it was still good. Yesterday I went over a friend's, and we watched The Godfather, which I actually haven't seen in, I don't know, 15 years or maybe even more than that. So that was fun. At my age, that's fun. That's my caveat. Except Edgar Allan Poe constantly rereading his stuff. Well, if that's a good place to stay. I find myself rereading Frankenstein a lot. I always have it kind of on my nightstand next to another book that I'm reading, and I'll just pick it up and kind of grab sections or pages or something. I dedicate an hour a night when I get into bed to read. It's the only time and space I have to do so to get through a lot of pages, surprisingly. Yeah, that is nice. I try to do that, and sometimes in the morning. That way, you're not tired. So I still manage to read some. I don't want to. I will say I read less comics than I, was intending. There's all the comics that I've read that I love that I want to reread, but it's hard because I'm like, well, am I going to go reread an old comic book that I loved or read something new? And I find that, not to go on a too big of a tangent, I think my favorite writers in comic books were writers that were reading far more than just comic books. And I think that came through, if we're talking about Alan Moore and Frank Miller and Mike Mignola and Chris Claremont and I just think they were probably really widely read, so they were able to pull from a lot of stuff. Heck, even Jack Kirby, I remember, and I don't know if this is true, but I think it was Mark Evie, his anchor. It starts with an E. I'm blanking on his last name, but he said whenever Jack Kirby sort of needed a new idea, he cracked open a sci-fi book and just kind of poked around a bit. So I like the idea of pulling from different mediums instead of just referencing other comic books. I kind of think that was I'm not going to say downfall of the 90s, but I felt like that felt very self-referential. So that's why I feel like if I'm going to read something, generally it's outside of comics. I still read comics, I mean, don't get me wrong, but not to the degree that I used to. Good thing to read books before bed, better than staring at a phone or tablet. Yeah, I know. That is definitely the truth. And just the smell alone of books before you go to bed. This is funny, maybe not so funny. So I was reading A Christmas Carol, and I got a really nice edition of it. It's a Everyman's Library, and they do archival pages, really beautifully done books. And I don't have a lot of those, but some of my favorite classic lit books are in Everyman's Library. And I'm like, oh man, I bet this one smells great. And I kind of bring it up to my face and I drop it, and I get a paper cut across my cheek from trying to sniff my book. And I'm like, I don't know what's worse, the fact that happened, or that how am I supposed to tell people that that's what happened? I wasn't in a fight. I didn't save a baby from a tiger. I was going to smell my book, and I got a paper cut across the cheek. It was a little embarrassing, I gotta say. Yeah, I wanted to start, excuse me, essentially rebuying some of my favorite books in like a nice format so they were archival. So, yeah, I have Every Man's Library. I highly recommend it. It's funny because sometimes whenever you look at yourself inking or drawing and you're doing something, it reminds you of another inker. Like this to me it's like John Romita Jr. kind of stuff. That wasn't the intent. It's just like, how do I portray these long like bands of leather? And that's just kind of when it came out. Like it totally reminds me of John Romita Jr. stuff. Bedtime readers unite. 4 months into doing the show, I broke a shovel trying to dig a brick out of the yard and gave myself a big black eye. Ouch. Yeah, there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds. All right, I gotta take a look at the whole thing here to make sure that I'm not going off the rails. Reruns for 6 weeks. Wow. Dr. Mask, I can't do anything around the house without inflicting some kind of harm on myself. That is 100% me. I remember, I don't know if people are interested in this. We needed a new sink, and I'm not handy, but I'm not completely unhandy, if that's a word. Around the house, I'm like, you know what, we needed a new sink. I'm like, I can totally do that. I don't see why I can't. Except, I get under the sink, and I'm like, I can't fit under here. Like, let alone get a wrench under here. It was just, I'm like, I needed to learn yoga just to, like, take this sink, this faucet, out of the damn sink. So I gave up. I always run into, like, weird problems like that. Granted, I don't know how plumbers do it, so I have a feeling that they don't learn yoga, but All right, I think. Thing is, like, once you get something done like this, where you come up with a shorthand or a visual language for something like the leather straps, you just got to make sure that it all makes sense. And I think we're pretty good. So before I duplicate that sort of texture line work, I just want to double check, and I think we're good though. Although there's definitely a distinct like difference in inks, even though this is the same ink bottle. What probably happened was it's something as small as this. Before I use my brush, I always get it wet, because you do want a wet brush before you dip it in ink the first time. If not, it doesn't work quite as well. I think I put too much water in it, and then when I dipped it into the ink, all that water went into the ink and it just changed it enough where I'm getting these grays, which is a bit of a bummer, I have to say, but it's not too bad. And it is really snowing outside. Wow. The first snow of the holiday. Working under the sink is the worst. I changed the drain on one bath, and after 4 trips back to the hardware store was done. That is the other thing. Oh my god. The endless trips to the hardware store. That is what drives me over the edge. This is so not art related, but I built a workbench, but it was, I don't want to call it fancy, but it had like extending like leaves on the edges, wheels, like it was like my ideal workbench. And I'm like, you know what? I vowed. I'm like, I am not going to go to the hardware store. I'm going to spend a week, making sure I have every last thing I could possibly need. I've measured and remeasured, and I'm like, this is going to be a one-day build, a la Adam Savage kind of thing. And sure enough, I had to go to the hardware store. Like, at that point, I'm like, I think it's impossible. I think it's literally impossible to not have to go to the hardware store at least twice. I love the wrapping on his wrist and hands. Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because that's one of the things that I remember. I think I mentioned it before. I was introduced to Hawkman really through this 4-issue miniseries in the 80s, because I didn't read virtually any DC, to be honest. There was a 4-issue miniseries, and I remember there was one scene. I haven't reread it in a long time, but where he's sort of pulling out his Hawkman armor, and he's like wrapping his hands in this leather with like the spikes on it. It was just a really cool scene. It always stuck with me. So I'm like, well, he at least has to have that, because that's my version of my idea of Hawkman is that from that miniseries. So this large black shape on his shoulder. John's Long Box. Hey, Happy New Year's. How's it going? This is Horace H. Hoover without his helmet. This is actually what he looks like. So, if anybody was wondering, you just got the inside scoop. This is actually what Horace H. Hoover looks like. That'd be a great interview. Alrighty, let's do some feathers. Do you think Hawkman loses feathers like regular birds? I wonder. I feel like he would. I guess the same goes for Angel. Well, pre-apocalypse Angel, we'll say. Like if Hawkman needed to make a pen real quick, like a quill pen, he just kind of plucks a feather out of his wing and then just kind of whittles down a feather into a pen. That's what I would do, but that's just me. Young Yan Zhao, how's it going? Happy New Year. Thanks for popping in. I think yeah, again, I left all of the kind of tedious, repetitious parts of the drawing left, so lots of jumping around and It'll probably take me at least another session to finish this out, but I said I wanted to experiment a little bit, so I might do maybe some splatter. That would be crazy. Splatter? I don't know. Does Hawkman warrant splatter? I mean, I could just do sort of a atmospheric background. I bought the Vince Garibaldi Peanuts Christmas album on vinyl. It sounds so good. CD Quality has been championing that CD sound better than vinyl, but this record proved me wrong. That's awesome. I've never heard it on vinyl. I bet it does sound so good, though. I don't have a big vinyl collection, unfortunately. I know you do, John. You have a crazy collection. But I have been trying to find some of at least my favorite jazz albums, a couple hardcore albums, some hip hop. On vinyl, just to have them. A couple of Kiss albums. I actually have Love Gun with the original like insert, so it has a paper gun. Yeah, that was pretty cool. Alrighty, I think I'm probably going to call this one quits. I am going to show that Max sculpt in case anybody hasn't seen it. But we'll take a look, see where I'm at. Alright, so this is Hawkman with half a wing done, unfortunately. But definitely made progress, which is good. Got his leather strap skirt thing going. Just got to finish up some stuff here, the wing. Probably finish this up next time. And then I'll see about a background. I don't know. We'll have to check that out. But yeah, let me grab that video. The blood logo inner sleeve in order form too. I'm blanking on the order form. Is that in there too? I was so hesitant to touch it. I pulled it out once when I got it, and I put it right back in. I should have scanned it in or something. With the Bang, I have the first Kiss album. Had it as a kid. Beat to hell. Oh, that's cool. No, 3 more hours. Yeah, I wish I could do 3 more hours. All right, so let me throw up the Max sculpt. So this is Max, and I really feel like I got his character with this, which when you're sculpting, it's all about pose, and to me, it's all about pose. Like, that is Max, you know, and proportions. So he's a little guy. He's short, but you can tell he's, you know, he's stocky and a little bit of an old guy gut, which is cool. You don't want to mess with him. you know, but he's got those big gorilla arms that I was looking for. I have no Kiss on vinyl, only CDs. Oh man, I don't have a lot. I used to have some growing up, and those got, I don't even know what happened to those. They might be in like my parents' attic or something like that. There's usually a green marble look inner sleeve with the Kiss logo, but I'm gonna have to check that out. Thank you, ZBrush or Blender. This is ZBrush. I've been long time ZBrush sculptor. So yeah, this worked out really well, and I will, again, I'll sort of chop it up for an STL. So if people want to download it and 3D print it, you can. If not, I'll try to have a modeler, like a toy maker, make this like they did for the Horse Age Hoover stuff. So Max is my favorite. Max is cool. I love all three of them. They're so different. You know, you have the characters and personalities are so different. It's fun to have them all together. So if I really want to draw like a sort of a brawler, bruiser kind of guy, I get Max, like an older guy. You know, if I want to Nosferatu, it's Slurp, etc., etc. Is it weird I appreciate the shirt partially sticking out the back? No, thank you for noticing that, because that is one of those details that a lot of sculptors don't pay attention to, because to them the back is the back, right? Nobody's going to see the back, so they just kind of phone it in. But I paid a lot of attention to every aspect of every view of the sculpture. That's why, you know, like if the pose is cool, then even from the back you get an idea of the pose, right? You can see his character just from behind. You're like, oh man. So that's why I'm such a stickler for the pose. But yeah, he turned out pretty good. So more news on him later. I'll definitely do a paint job so we can see him in his max colors, and do a render whenever I get a chance to do that. Spicer, I love ZBrush, been using it for 12 years. That's awesome. Then we are very similar in our knowledge of ZBrush. It is unique, but it is incredible, and I will never ever let ZBrush go. John, how long does it take to sculpt that? It took a chunk of time. You know, 30, 40 hours. I handle things kind of in a different way. Some sculptors, and again, I don't know if anybody's interested in this, but they will sculpt in symmetry. So they only do half in like it's called an A pose or a T pose or something like that. And then they will pose the character afterwards. But the problem with that is that's not how people... It's okay for game modeling or other things, but if you're doing a sculpture, a distinct sculpture, you're not going to use it for games, then you need to sculpt not using symmetry. Because when the way your body gets positioned in a particular stance, it's, I would say, almost impossible to get that pose after sculpting in symmetry, if that makes any sense. It's like taking like a Star Wars figure and giving them a naturalistic pose, assuming they had more articulation, right? It's very difficult, as opposed to, you know, Michelangelo or Bernini sculpting that particular pose. It's very different. A good example is the face. So this face was not sculpted in symmetry, and if you take half of the face and you mirror it, it's very asymmetrical. But if you sculpt like this, it works and it looks more naturalistic. So anyway, that's my take on sculpting. Maybe I'll do something on that later. You know, I've been doing it for so long. I definitely have a different take on it. I don't do stuff for games very much, so it's sculpting, not game modeling, which is definitely different. Yeah, you can make it in symmetry, but for collectibles, you have to finish it off out of symmetry. Yeah. Yep. You can get the basic, you know, like body type and things like that, but you have to. if you want it to look a certain way. Again, if you're doing games, if you're doing other things, it's fine to do it in symmetry, but not for little miniatures or things like that. So anyway, yeah. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. This was fun. This was a cool New Year's stream. I appreciate it. And I will post things later on.